Friends, what I am about to say may unsettle you, but not because it points fingers at neighbors or fuels fear. It unsettles because it asks you to reconsider how easily we mistake symbols for facts, and how often we ignore the deeper meanings that press upon our conscience. The church, the marketplace, and the modern mind alike are often reluctant to speak about discernment because discernment demands responsibility. It refuses us the comfort of scapegoats. It insists that we look inward before we look outward. And so let us be clear from the beginning. When I speak of witches, of signatures, of odors that make the skin crawl, I am speaking in metaphor, the ancient, necessary language of the soul. I am speaking of the ways corruption announces itself, not through horns and smoke, but through atmospheres we have learned to tolerate. The devil, if we must use the word, operates through the senses because humans do. We live by what we see, hear, touch, taste, and yes, what we smell. And smell, more than any other sense, bypasses our arguments and goes straight to memory, to instinct, to truth we feel before we explain it away. You have walked into rooms where something felt wrong long before you could name it. You have encountered situations that looked respectable but left you uneasy. That unease is not superstition. It is perception dulled by habit. To say that smell is the devil's favorite weapon is to say that corruption announces itself subtly, invisibly, unmistakably to those who are paying attention. And once you learn to recognize these signals, not literally in the air, but morally in the atmosphere, you stop walking into traps disguised as normalcy. The first odor is described as decaying flesh or rotting meat, and the image is deliberately disturbing. Decay is what happens when life is no longer nourished, when something once living is left unattended. In human terms, this is the smell of spiritual death environments where empathy has died, where cruelty is excused, where human beings are reduced to utilities or obstacles. You sense it in workplaces that thrive on humiliation, in relationships sustained by contempt, in cultures that treat premature destruction as entertainment. Murder here is not always literal. It is the slow killing of hope, dignity, and innocence. When you step into such spaces, something in you recoils because the soul recognizes decay even when the mind rationalizes it. The second odor is said to be pungent, like cat urine mixed with something fishy, an image meant to evoke corruption hidden behind familiarity. This is the scent of perversion in its truest sense. Not merely sexual, but the twisting of what is meant for good into something self-serving. Familiar spirits, in metaphorical language, are patterns we inherit and repeat without questioning. Bloodlines are corrupted not by magic, but by unexamined habits. Addiction passed down as inevitability. Betrayal normalized as survival. Exploitation reframed as ambition. When something feels off but oddly familiar, when dysfunction wears the mask of tradition, the soul smells the lie before the intellect catches up. The third odor, burnt hair and feathers, signals identity theft. The attack on calling. Hair and feathers both signify covering, identity, and flight. To burn them is to reduce a person's sense of self to ashes. This smell appears wherever people are monitored, compared, surveilled, and reduced to metrics. It appears when vocation is replaced by performance, when calling is traded for applause. You feel it when your creativity shrinks under scrutiny, when your originality is punished for not fitting a mold. The soul knows when it is being watched, not to be protected, but to be controlled. That acrid sensation is not paranoia. It is the alarm of conscience. The fourth odor is described as metallic, ozone-like, sharp, electric, unsettling. This symbolizes high-level manipulation, systems that open portals not to wonder, but to domination. These are environments where power is prized over goodness, where efficiency replaces wisdom, where people become cogs in machines too large to question. Principalities and powers in the old language, are not goblins in the dark. They are structures of influence that shape behavior while denying responsibility. You feel this ozone when the air crackles with anxiety, when decisions are rushed to avoid reflection, when dissent is treated as threat. The smell is the soul's way of saying, something here is larger than any one person, and it does not love you. The fifth odor, rancid dairy, sour butter, spoiled cream, points to an attack on prosperity, not in the sense of money alone, but in the sense of nourishment. Milk is meant to sustain life. When it spoils, it cannot fulfill its purpose. This is the stench of abundance turned toxic wealth that promises freedom but delivers bondage, success that costs health, growth that hollows out meaning. The promised land, in metaphor, is not a place but a state of alignment where effort bears fruit without devouring the one who labors. When finances bring constant anxiety, when blessings feel heavy rather than joyful, something has spoiled. Not because prosperity is evil, but because it has been severed from gratitude and stewardship. The sixth odor is the most deceptive. Overwhelming perfume masking something foul underneath. This is the scent of corruption disguised as beauty, death presented as light. It is the Jezebel spirit, in symbolic terms, the manipulation that uses charm to avoid accountability, aesthetics to excuse harm, charisma to bypass character. You encounter it in leaders who inspire but do not listen, in movements that promise liberation while demanding conformity, in lifestyles that look enviable but leave emptiness in their wake. The cloying sweetness is what numbs discernment. It is not the presence of fragrance that is dangerous, but its purpose, to distract from decay rather than heal it. Now pause. If this sounds alarming, remember the aim is not fear but intelligence. Spiritual intelligence, properly understood, is not obsession with darkness. It is fluency in truth. Recognition without action is worthless. Yes, but action begins with the right kind of response. Not accusation, not paranoia, not the absurd cruelty of suspecting others. The correct action is alignment. When the supernatural announces itself through scent, the wiser translation is this: when corruption announces itself through atmosphere, believe your conscience over convenient explanations. Wealth, inner transformation, and moral strength converge here. Money amplifies atmosphere. In a healthy environment, it builds. In a corrupted one, it accelerates decay. The pursuit of abundance without integrity always produces the stench of rancid nourishment. Inner transformation, by contrast, cleans the air quietly. It does not need incense. It needs honesty. Moral strength does not march into rooms accusing witches. It walks in and changes the atmosphere by refusing to participate in lies. Personal growth becomes an act of ventilation. You open windows long sealed by habit. You let truth circulate where silence once stagnated. You stop masking what is rotten and start tending what is alive. This is the practical wisdom hidden beneath the provocative metaphor. You do not fight darkness by naming smells. You outgrow it by cultivating health. And health has its own fragrance. It smells like clarity. It smells like patience. It smells like work done with care and rest taken without guilt. It smells like generosity that expects nothing in return. It smells like discipline that protects joy rather than strangling it. These are not things you accuse others of lacking. They are things you practice until they shape you. So when you are told to remind the enemy of his defeat, understand this in the deepest sense. Darkness is defeated whenever a human being refuses unconscious living. Calvary, redemption, victory, whatever language you use finds its meaning not in shouting at shadows, but in choosing light consistently. The battle is not yours to wage theatrically, it is yours to live faithfully. Let this be the awakening. Not a hunt for witches, but a rejection of decay. Not fear of odors, but discernment of atmospheres. Not suspicion of neighbors, but responsibility for your own life. Because the truest revelation is this: corruption cannot survive where meaning is cultivated, where wealth is stewarded, where integrity is non-negotiable, where love is practiced rather than preached. And as you walk forward with this awareness, you will notice something remarkable. The air around you changes, not because others are exposed, but because you are aligned. The senses that once alarmed you now guide you. The metaphors that once frightened you now instruct you. And the life you live, attentive, grounded, purposeful, becomes its own quiet testimony that light does not need to shout to be victorious. This is the moral epiphany waiting beneath the scandal. Nothing truly evil hides in smell. It hides in neglect. And nothing truly good announces itself with fear. It announces itself with clarity, courage, and a life that smells, if we must keep the metaphor like something clean, nourishing, and real. And once you begin to recognize that cleanliness of soul matters more than suspicion of shadows, the entire world rearranges itself before your eyes. You stop scanning rooms for enemies and start tending your inner house with care. You realize that the most dangerous odors were never in the air at all, but in habits left unattended, motives left unquestioned, desires left undisciplined. The nose was never meant to hunt demons. It was meant to teach you that something, somewhere, needs attention. This is why the ancient moral teachers spoke so often about watchfulness. Not vigilance against others, but attentiveness toward oneself. The human heart, left unwatched, grows stale. It begins to recycle old resentments, old justifications, old fears until the atmosphere becomes unbreathable. And when that happens, people do not leave the room. They adapt to the smell. They normalize what once would have driven them out. This is how corruption survives, not by overpowering conscience, but by tiring it. Wealth plays a subtle role in this normalization. Prosperity can insulate us from discomfort long enough for decay to go unnoticed. We learn to mask unpleasant truths with comfort, to perfume over emptiness with entertainment, to explain away misalignment with success. The problem is never abundance itself. The problem is abundance without examination. When money becomes the solvent that dissolves moral questions, the air grows sweet and sickly at the same time. And the soul, if it has not learned discernment, mistakes ease for health. Inner transformation begins precisely where this confusion ends. It begins when you allow yourself to feel the unease instead of anesthetizing it. When something smells off in your life, anxiety that will not lift, success that does not satisfy, relationships that feel transactional, you resist the urge to explain it away. You sit with it. You ask what is being neglected. You trace the odor back not to a person, but to a pattern. And patterns, once seen, can be changed. Moral strength is forged in that willingness to stay present when comfort urges escape. It is easier to accuse an external enemy than to admit internal disorder. It is easier to dramatize evil than to discipline desire. But courage chooses the harder honesty. It chooses to clean what has been ignored rather than curse what has been imagined. This is not weakness. It is the most demanding form of strength. Personal growth at this depth stops being about self-expression and becomes about self-governance. You learn that freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want, but the ability to want what leads to life. You refine your appetites. You become selective, not out of fear, but out of respect for your own becoming. You understand that not everything that enters your home, your mind, or your schedule deserves to stay. Discernment is hospitality with standards. And as this discipline takes root, the pursuit of a positive, meaningful life becomes remarkably practical. You clean your literal spaces, not as ritual, but as alignment. Order outside supports order within. You simplify commitments, not because you are overwhelmed, but because you are focused. You choose conversations that build rather than corrode. You invest resources where they nourish rather than impress. None of this is dramatic. All of it is transformative. The metaphors of smell now reverse their function. You begin to recognize the fragrance of health. It is subtle. It does not announce itself with intensity. It smells like calm mornings and honest work. It smells like laughter that is not cruel, ambition that is not desperate, rest that is not escape. It smells like truth spoken without malice, and silence kept without fear. This fragrance does not cling to one house or one person. It spreads quietly wherever integrity is practiced. Redemption lives here not as spectacle, but as renewal. What once felt polluted is cleansed not by denunciation, but by replacement. Old habits lose their power when better ones take their place. Old fears loosen their grip when trust is practiced consistently. Old wounds stop festering when they are exposed to light and care. This is how healing actually happens, not by hunting the source of rot endlessly, but by restoring circulation. Purpose, at last, rises naturally from this healed environment. You do not need to ask constantly what you are meant to do. Purpose reveals itself through attention. It shows up in the work that feels heavy but honest, in the relationships that require patience but reward, faithfulness, in the commitments that stretch you without hollowing you out. Purpose is not found in exotic revelations. It is discovered in the places you have learned to keep clean. And now the title that once provoked unease completes its journey into wisdom. The idea of household odors revealing a witch nearby dissolves into a far more demanding truth. The state of your inner house reveals what rules there. Not neighbors, not strangers, but values, loves, priorities. Whatever governs you leaves a trace. Whatever you tolerate shapes the air you breathe. This is not cause for fear. It is cause for hope. Because atmospheres can be changed. Houses can be aired out. Lives can be reordered. Nothing is permanently tainted unless it is permanently neglected. The moment you decide to live deliberately, to steward wealth with gratitude, to pursue growth with patience, to practice moral strength without spectacle, the air begins to clear. And when it does, you stop needing warnings framed as scandal. You no longer require dramatic metaphors to stay awake. You have learned to trust the quiet signals of conscience, the gentle resistance of truth, the steady pull of meaning. You walk into spaces and know when to stay and when to leave. You build a life that does not rely on perfumes to hide decay, because decay has lost its home. This is the awakening that lasts. Not fear sharpened into superstition, but discernment matured into wisdom. Not obsession with darkness, but devotion to light. And light, once lived rather than shouted, has a way of cleansing everything it touches. So live attentively. Keep your inner house in order. Let your wealth serve your values. Let your growth be slow and deep. Let your strength be quiet and reliable. And let your life, in the end, bear witness to this simple, liberating truth. When meaning governs a soul, nothing foul can linger for long, and the air itself becomes fit to breathe again. And when the air becomes fit to breathe again, you discover something quietly astonishing. You have more strength than you ever thought you did. Not the strength of confrontation, not the swagger of accusation, but the steady endurance of a life no longer leaking energy into confusion. You realize that most exhaustion is not caused by labor, but by contradiction, by saying one thing and living another, by desiring depth while choosing distraction, by longing for peace while feeding restlessness. When those contradictions resolve, energy returns. Life, which once felt heavy and resistant, begins to cooperate. This is why the deepest spiritual battles are fought not in dramatic moments, but in ordinary choices. You choose what to let into your home: ideas, media, voices, rhythm. You choose what to feed your mind when no one is watching. You choose whether money will be a master demanding constant attention or a servant quietly enabling good. These choices are small enough to seem harmless, but together they compose the atmosphere of your life. And atmospheres, once established, shape everything that lives within them. Wealth, understood rightly, becomes a test not of morality but of maturity. It asks whether you can hold power without being distorted by it, whether you can enjoy comfort without becoming numb, whether you can possess without being possessed. When wealth replaces meaning, it begins to rot even as it shines. When meaning governs wealth, it becomes almost invisible, valuable precisely because it does not dominate the room. The richest homes are often the least impressive to the eye, because their abundance is stored in trust, generosity, and peace rather than display. Inner transformation deepens here into gratitude that is no longer reactive. You are not grateful only when circumstances are favorable. You are grateful because gratitude keeps the soul awake. It trains you to notice what is life-giving before it is threatened. It sharpens your sense of proportion. Gratitude does not deny difficulty. It refuses to let difficulty become the whole story. In a grateful life, even struggle has boundaries. It is allowed to teach, but not to rule. Moral strength matures into restraint that is not bitter. You no longer need to condemn what you refuse. You simply do not participate. This quiet refusal is often misunderstood as indifference, but it is nothing of the sort. It is care disciplined into form. It is love that has learned how to protect itself so that it can remain generous. The strongest people are not those who fight everything, but those who know what is worth fighting for and what is better left to starve. Personal growth, now freed from anxiety, becomes surprisingly joyful. You are no longer chasing an idealized version of yourself. You are cooperating with the real one. Growth feels less like pressure and more like unfolding. You accept your limitations without surrendering to them. You work patiently on what can be strengthened and release what cannot be controlled. This humility is not defeat. It is realism infused with hope. And so the pursuit of a positive, meaningful life reaches its final coherence. Meaning is no longer something you hunt through dramatic revelations or shocking warnings. It is something you practice through attention, integrity, and care. You begin to see that the world does not need more people skilled at detecting corruption in others. It needs people willing to prevent it in themselves. It needs lives that are breathable spaces where truth can enter without suffocating, where questions can be asked without punishment, where goodness can take root without being mocked. Now the metaphor that once spoke of witches and odors completes its transformation. What truly reveals the presence of corruption is not a scent in the hallway, but the condition of the heart. And what truly reveals the presence of goodness is not perfection, but repentance, an ongoing willingness to clean, to correct, to restore. The real danger was never an enemy lurking nearby. It was the temptation to live unconsciously, to accept what dulls the senses, to perfume over decay rather than heal it. But you have chosen differently. You have learned to notice. You have learned to tend. You have learned that the house of your life deserves care because something sacred is meant to live there. And when a life is lived this way, awake, aligned, attentive, it becomes its own kind of sanctuary. People breathe easier around it. Truth feels safer near it. Hope finds room to sit down and rest. This is the moral epiphany at the heart of it all. Evil does not need to be hunted obsessively. It needs to be deprived of hospitality. Corruption does not need to be shouted down. It needs to be outgrown. Darkness does not retreat because it is accused. It retreats because it cannot survive where light is lived consistently. So let your days be simple and your convictions clear. Let your wealth serve rather than rule. Let your growth be slow enough to last. Let your strength be quiet enough to be trusted. Keep your inner house clean, not obsessively, but faithfully. And as you do, you will find that no foul atmosphere can linger where meaning is cultivated, where gratitude is practiced, and where truth is loved more than comfort. When that happens, the world does not suddenly become safe or easy. but it becomes breathable. And a breathable life, filled with purpose and integrity, is the surest sign that nothing corrupt is ruling nearby. And a breathable life, once discovered, becomes something you instinctively protect, not with fear, but with care. You no longer barricade yourself against the world, you cultivate yourself within it. You understand that holiness, wisdom, integrity, whatever name you give to a well-ordered soul, was never meant to be fragile. It was meant to be resilient. It does not shatter at contact with darkness. It clarifies it. It does not panic in the presence of corruption. It exposes it simply by refusing to participate. This is why the most profound change is often invisible. You stop needing to announce what you stand against because you are finally clear about what you stand for. You stop reacting to every disturbance because you have learned how to maintain equilibrium. Your inner life develops a kind of pressure system, healthy, regulated, stable, so that when something toxic tries to enter, it is noticed immediately and expelled without drama. The house does not fill with smoke because the windows are already open. Wealth, in such a life, becomes almost incidental. It is present, useful, sometimes even abundant, but no longer central. You notice how much lighter money feels when it is no longer asked to justify your worth or numb your unease. It moves where it is needed and leaves when it is not. You stop gripping it as proof of security and start using it as an expression of stewardship. And in doing so, you discover a strange paradox. When money is no longer your source of peace, it becomes far less capable of stealing it. Inner transformation continues, not in leaps, but in layers. Old reflexes soften. Old anxieties lose urgency. You catch yourself responding differently than you once would have, and you realize growth has been happening quietly all along. This is the miracle no one markets because it cannot be packaged. The slow rewiring of the soul through repeated, faithful choices. Not dramatic enough for spectacle, too profound for slogans, and yet utterly life-changing. Moral strength, at this depth, is no longer loud enough to frighten others. It is calm enough to invite them. People sense that you are not trying to win an argument or expose a threat. You are trying to live truthfully. That posture disarms hostility. It lowers defenses. It creates spaces where conversations deepen instead of escalate. This is strength that heals rather than humiliates, corrects rather than condemns. Personal growth now reveals its final gift, discernment without suspicion. You can recognize when something is unhealthy without assuming malice. You can name decay without imagining demons behind every inconvenience. You have learned that wisdom sees clearly without seeing enemies everywhere. This maturity protects you from both naivete and paranoia, the twin failures that drain so many lives. And here, finally, the pursuit of a positive, meaningful life resolves into something simple enough to be missed by those who crave complexity. A meaningful life is not one that avoids every danger, but one that remains oriented toward truth no matter what it encounters. It is a life that knows how to clean itself when dust accumulates, how to rest when strain builds, how to repent when pride intrudes, how to realign when drift is detected. The sensational title that once promised hidden threats has completed its work. It has led you not to fear your neighbors, but to examine your atmosphere, not to hunt witches, but to reject decay, not to sharpen your senses against others, but to refine your conscience within yourself. The revelation was never about what lurks nearby. It was about what you allow to linger. And now, standing here at the end of this long meditation, something within you is steadier than before. You are less impressed by appearances, less frightened by scandal, less distracted by noise. You trust quiet clarity more than dramatic claims. You trust the slow work of integrity more than sudden revelations. You trust that light lived daily does more good than darkness exposed occasionally. So go back into your ordinary life with extraordinary attentiveness. Notice what nourishes you. Remove what corrodes you. Keep your inner house open to truth and closed to neglect. Let your wealth remain a tool. Let your growth remain patient. Let your strength remain gentle. Let your life remain breathable. Because in the end, the clearest sign that nothing corrupt is ruling nearby is not the absence of strange smells or unsettling stories, but the presence of a soul at peace, a conscience awake, and a life steadily becoming what it was always meant to be.